YouTube, today we're going to go over the Aurorus, Araquanid, and Arcanine team that I used for back-to-back battles. Let's get started and roll the episode. So why Aurorus? Aurorus is a Pokemon I felt like could be viable, but it just, of course, has so many glaring weaknesses. However, it does offer a lot. Freeze Dry is really cool. Meteor Beam is really solid. Of course, Aurora Veil is really good in a format potentially. And of course, having the ability to change to weather seemed fantastic. However, the typing just made it really hard to run. However, I did think that there was some potential, but maybe like Necrozma, which does help against Zacian, which of course is Aurorus, is one of the worst nightmares out there. It helps out the Trick Room for Aurorus, and of course the Aurora Veil could really benefit the Necrozma. So that is how I ended up starting off with these two to create the rest of the team. So how was the team formed? It started off with Aurorus, Necrozma, Dustmane, and Yveltal combination because I felt Yveltal was a really good pairing to Necrozma, which of course is a really good restricted duo because Necrozma was really good against Xerneas and Zacian, which Yveltal doesn't like. It's also really good against Calyx Ice Rider. And then the Yveltal helps pair up with Necrozma because it deals with Calyx Shadow Rider, and it's really good against a lot of the meta that's not Zacian, which Necrozma handles. And they're both really bulky restricted and can take advantage of the Aurora Veil with Aurorus. And Trick Room's really nice on the Necrozma here because it can help pair up with Aurorus, set up for Freeze Dry, Meteor Beam, really strong hit, as well as Aurora Veil helping out the Necrozma and Yveltal being even more bulky. The next Pokemon I decided to add was an Intimidate Mon. However, I was looking at the Intimidate Mons. I didn't really like Gyarados. I thought Incineroar might be the key here, but I felt like I needed a little bit more speed on this team. Yes, this is more dedicated to Trick Room, but my Yveltal I knew was probably going to be a bit faster, so I can get like fast Snarls off. And I felt like, you know, Incineroar with the extra dark typing, is it really necessary? I thought about it and I felt like maybe it wasn't, so I wanted a bit of speed. I thought, you know, maybe have Arcanine because of the fact that it can Bulldoze next to Necrozma, Dustmane. And even though I don't get the speed advantage, the fact that I could activate my policy without even having to go for the Trick Room seemed pretty nice. So I ended up going with Arcanine or the Intimidate Mon, and it really does help out here. And it helps against Zacian, which is a really important factor, and it's not really weak to Sacred Sword, which is really nice because I don't have to worry if I'm switching out Necrozma into my Intimidate Fire type Pokemon. I'm not taking a bunch of damage from the Sacred Sword that they would target anyway. So I felt like Arcanine was pretty nice. It could also switch into Play Rough, which Yveltal doesn't like taking, and of course Incineroar is neutral to Play Rough. So Arcanine was just a really good fit here. Rillaboom was the next Pokemon I decided to add to the team because of the fact that I felt like Kyogre was dishing out way too much damage, and it was really threatening to Necrozma. I felt like I'd be taking so much damage, I'd either be forced to max right away, or I'd be like either O-code potentially from like a Max Geyser, or just fail to set up Trick Room. So I felt like Rillaboom was the mon that I wanted here. On offensive, Rillaboom seemed pretty good. The grassy terrain also helped with Necrozma and Arcanine a little bit, and felt like it was a really good pairing with the Aurora. So I felt like Rillaboom was a really good fit on this team for the Kyogre. Then last Pokemon, I felt like I wanted Wide Guard because I still wanted like a mon that was doing pretty good under Trick Room. Good damage output because the team didn't really have much damage output outside of Aurorus and Necrozma. Maybe Rillaboom can dish out a decent amount of damage, but I wanted like more pressure immediately. And I also really like the idea of having a good water type and Wide Guard. So I was looking at the list and I thought Araquanid seemed really solid because I could Wide Guard against Calyx Shadow Riders if they don't decide to max, which seems really solid against Kyogre Water Spouts, which of course setting up Trick Room really hard to set up when you had these powerful spread moves being unleashed against you. And I thought Wide Guard would be really nice here. So I thought, you know, let's add Aurorus to the team, and that was how the 6 was formed. All right, let's go over the items, the movesets, and the Eevee Spreads of the team. We have Power Herb Aurorus up first with the Snow Warning ability with Freeze Dry, Meteor Beam, Aurora Veil, and Protect. Power Herb, of course, for the Meteor Beam, which is a really strong rock type move that also boosts the special attack, which is really nice. Snow Warning I chose over Refrigerate because I think Snow Warning is just really good in the format. Being able to change Kyogre and Groudon Weather seems really nice, as well as the fact that it can break certain sashes. So for instance, Calyx Shadow Rider can be a really important sash to break, and that allows my Yveltal to then Revenge KO with Sucker Punch, which is really important, I feel like. So I do really like having that option. And then finally, Freeze Dry, Meteor Beam, Aurora Veil, and Protect. Aurora Veil helps out with Necrozma, Dustmane, and Yveltal, allowing it to be extremely bulky, and this team generally does have a lot of bulk. Protect and Preserve the Aurorus because it has one of the worst defensive typings in the game, really vulnerable to a lot of super effective moves. Meteor Beam, of course, really strong rock type move, and Freeze Dry I valued over like Blizzard or Ice Beam or any of those moves that could give me a stronger max move. I just prefer Freeze Dry mainly because of the fact that you can hit Palkia, you can hit Kyogre, you can hit Gastrodon, and a lot of other Pokemon super effectively. And I think it's worth it, even taking the weaker power of the max move, mainly because I'll be Dynamaxing Necrozma in most of the games that I would play. And then finally, the Eevee Spread here, we have 204 HP, 52 defense, 252 special attack with a Quiet Nature. The 204 HP gives me a HP stat of 224, which gives me maximum grassy terrain recovery. I went with max special attack because usually I just go for strong hits anyway, and Aurorus doesn't exactly have the strongest special attack stat. I feel like just helping it out in general seems really nice. And then the remaining defense went to take on like Grassy Glides from opposing Rillaboom, which could be really important. And there weren't any specific damage calcs that I aimed for Aurorus to survive. I felt like it's kind of an interesting Pokemon because it is a Pokemon that just hits super effectively, but with Aurora can be decently bulky, and especially with like Yveltal support with Snarl and Necrozma max moves, it wasn't exactly a bench range I felt like that I had to aim for. And I felt like having the max special attack could really come in handy and allow me to get some certain KOs in specific situations. Next Pokemon we have is the Weakness Policy Necrozma Dustmane with Prism Armor, Rock Slide, Sunsteel Strike, Earthquake, and Trick Room. Necrozma Dustmane, extremely bulky Pokemon. Prism Armor, of course, reducing super effective damage by 25% is really nice. And the Weakness Policy, really just a good pairing for Dynamax in general, and high physical attack stat, although vulnerable to Intimidates, of course. Rock Slide, Sunsteel Strike, Earthquake, Trick Room is really nice. Weakness Policy is just really good for Necrozma, especially since I can set it up with the Arcanine Boltos as well as Aurora, making it extremely hard to damage Necrozma with the Maximus on top. This seems like a really strong monster that can dish out a lot of damage and boost up his defenses. Is absolutely insane. I have the Rock Slide, Sunsteel Strike, Earthquake because I like the Sunsteel Strike and Earthquake, of course, for the max moves. Sunsteel Strike is stab as well as Earthquake for the hitting against like Incineroar, boosting up the special defense. It's really nice. And then Rock Slide, I felt like I'd rather have Rock Slide than Psychic Fangs, mainly because I can hit like Yveltal, I could change the weather. I felt like it was pretty important to have that Rock Slide there instead, so I felt like, you know what, I'm just gonna have Rock Slide. It's more consistent, I felt like, than I would be going for Psychic Fangs, where I feel like if I'm clicking Psychic Fangs anyway, there were very few situations, maybe it'd be against a Kyogre, which I have like Aurorus, I have Yveltal, which is already good against Kyogre, I have Rillaboom, which is okay against it, and I'd rather probably be clicking Max Quake anyway for the most part, or I'd be going for Sunsteel Strike. I feel like I would be clicking those max boosts the most, and then like the last time I'd probably go for the rock move. I feel like I didn't really need Psychic Terrain on this team because it hurts my own Rillaboom, and my Yveltal Sucker Punch isn't an option anymore, so I felt like I didn't need the Psychic Fangs or the Psychic Terrain. That's why I decided not to have it on this team. And then finally, I have max HP on the Necrozma for the maximum bulk. I have a 180 attack because it gives me a +1 in the attack stat. I wanted to dish out a lot of damage, especially if I'm only a +1 because of like the Intimidates out there from Incineroar, and 76 special defense just to take a little bit better hits from the Kyogre, for instance, and that and other special attackers like Regieleki, which is really important to me. And that is the Necrozma set. Next Pokemon we have is the G-Max Rillaboom with the Miracle Seed item, Grassy Surge for the ability with Grassy Glide, High Horsepower, Solar Sense, and Protect. Rillaboom, just a great Pokemon with the Grassy Surge and Grassy Glide. It's just an insane combination. Fake Out support if I did run Fake Out on my team, but yeah, Miracle Seed here is to help boost up my Grassy Glide, which allows me to KO Kyogre's guaranteed, which is really important to me because I need to dish out a lot of damage to Kyogre before it can get like really powerful attacks off into Necrozma, and can be pretty important in other situations as well. Grassy Glide can follow up with Sucker Punch as well with Yveltal, so I really do having that offensive Grassy Glide option. The Grassy Surge, of course, for the Grassy Terrain paired with Grassy Glide, one of the strongest moves that Yveltal does have. High Horsepower, I felt like having the High Horsepower was just nice to hit the Zacian, which is really nice because my main ways of hitting Zacian are going to be like Arcanine with Flamethrower, which doesn't do too much, the Necrozma Max Quake, and I just felt like having High Horsepower against like a Sub-Zacian just seemed really nice. And in case I do Dynamax the Rillaboom, I do have that option as well. Swords Dance. Now, the reason I have Swords Dance on this team and not like Fake Out is because I felt like I wouldn't click Fake Out most of the time when I had the Rillaboom out, because I felt like I'd be like leading maybe Necrozma, Rillaboom, and the Fake Out's kind of scripted. I probably wouldn't click Fake Out in most situations, I think, anyway, because if it's like a Zacian lead, maybe I'll just go hard into Arcanine instead. Or if I lead like Yveltal, Rillaboom, I probably suspect maybe a Protect anyway. So is there a point of having Fake Out on this Rillaboom where I don't think this team really needs as much? I think I'd rather have U-Turn over Swords Dance, but I felt like with Sword Stance, there was an option I could set up for. I have Soak on the Araquanid, which I could set up for. I have Aurora Veil, and I kind of liked having a way to physically set up an actual Pokemon instead of like going for the policy on the Necrozma, which I can't always guarantee. I thought, you know, Sword Stance could be really nice on the Rillaboom as a setup option. And then Protect to preserve the Rillaboom, which is important for the Kyogre again. The Eevee Spread is a pretty standard Rillaboom that I've been using. Max HP, of course, for the maximum bulk. 116 attack is really nice with the Adamant Nature. That gives me a +1 stat point and really dishes out a lot of damage with the Miracle Seed and the Grassy Glide. 4 defense, 4 speed, and the rest in special defense. I didn't really need much in speed. I might be switching in Kyogres in some cases, so I think having the extra special defense is just really nice. This allows it to live like Behemoth Blade from Zacian at +1, which is always nice with the max HP. Just felt like it was really good. Now, I didn't really click Sword Stance at all when I used to Rillaboom, but I felt like I didn't need Fake Out either, although the games that I did play, I think Fake Out would have been nice. So I just don't know what I would really use for the Rillaboom, because I don't think I need Sword Stance at all. I don't really think I need Fake Out. Maybe I could go U-turn. There's always like ways to explore with the Rillaboom. Maybe Wood Hammer would have been really nice on it as well. I think there are definitely rooms to explore, but yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of having Sword Stance, even though it seemed good in theory. During testing, I just like never had the opportunity to really click it. And maybe Fake Out would just be better in general, just for the safety net and having that comfort of having a pretty standard move on Rillaboom. However, yeah, that was my take on Sword Stance. It wasn't as great as I hoped for, but it seemed pretty good in theory, which is why I had it. All right, next Pokemon we got is the Assault Vest Yveltal with the Dark Aura ability with Foul Play, Snarl, Oblivion Wing, and Sucker Punch. Assault Vest Yveltal just really takes the attacks well, especially with Steel Spike and Max Quake Boost. It really just tanks attacks super well, and with the Assault Vest, I don't even need Aurora Veil, but it will just take attacks really nicely. Dark Aura, of course, to power up the dark type moves of Yveltal is really nice as well, such as that Foul Play, which is just out quite a crazy amount of damage. Snarl, of course, to help slow down these special attackers, really nice for Palkia and Kyogre. Oblivion Wing to heal the HP back, which is always nice, and for Airstream, and Sucker Punch as for KOs against like Calyx Shadow Rider or other weakened Pokemon. For the Eevee Spread, I went with a modest nature because I did want to have pretty good investment into the Yveltal for special attack, because it's a pretty high base special attack stat, as well as the fact that I want to heal a lot with the Oblivion Wing. So the more damage that I'm doing with Oblivion Wing, the more that I can heal. What I looked into was speed, and I felt like a lot of the Assault Vest Yveltals actually run speed, and the main reason is for Airstreams. With the Yveltal, after one Airstream, you can outspeed like Calyx Shadow Rider, which could be pretty huge. I felt like, you know, that doesn't seem too bad. You also get fast Snarls off against like modest Kyogre, some Palkias that are slower. Dialga's pretty important. And yeah, there's just a lot of Pokemon that you can outspeed with a pretty fast Yveltal and get the Snarls off before they attack, which could be a really huge difference. The next I decided to add was going to be HP. And I felt like 172 HP was pretty nice because that reduces the damage that Yveltal takes from Hail, which I felt like is pretty good. And I decided, okay, I'm going to run 68 HP with a modest nature because that gives me a +1 in the stat point. Then I just decided to add the remaining to the defense and special defense because I didn't really need that much, because I had Aurora Veil with Aurorus, I had Intimidate Will-O-Wisp with Arcanine support, and I had Max Steel Spike and Max Quake Boost. So Yveltal was just going to be able to tank attacks regardless of the situation and really be able to dish out a lot of damage, get some chip, which is really important with the Snarls, and yeah, just tank attacks like it was nothing. So next we have a Citrus Berry Arcanine with the Intimidate for the ability with Flamethrower, Bulldoze, Will-O-Wisp, and Protect. I have Citrus Berry Arcanine because I felt like that it would be more consistent than Leftovers, where I wouldn't always bring Rillaboom to Zacian matchups. So I did debate about having the Leftovers with the Grassy Terrain for like really good recovery. However, I felt like Citrus Berry just came into play more often. So I ended up choosing the Citrus Berry. Intimidate, of course, the ability of choice, because I did want an Intimidate and a Fire type mod for Zacian. Flamethrower here, Bulldoze, Will-O-Wisp, and Protect. Flamethrower, of course, for Ferrothorn, which Iron Defense Ferrothorn, not exactly the easiest Pokemon for my team to handle, so I felt like having Flamethrower was pretty nice. I would have liked Flare Blitz though in a lot of situations as well, because I do think Flare Blitz would have been able to hurt a lot against like Zacians and other things. However, I wasn't sure about the recoil, and I felt like Flamethrower would have been nice just for, again, Ferrothorn, which I wasn't too sure how common it was, but it does kind of wall a lot of my team. The only Pokemon that can really handle it effectively is a boost in Necrozma before it gets an Iron Defense up, and the Yveltal, unless I go for the Dynamax of Aurorus, which again, it can be pretty sketch. So I decided I'm going to go just Flamethrower on Arcanine for consistency. Bulldoze for the Necrozma setup. It can also be used for Yveltal as well, which is really nice and helps because Arcanine can outspeed Zacian after a Bulldoze and then go for the Wisp afterward. and then Protect and Preserve the Arcanine. So for the Arcanine Eevee Spread, I went with a pretty fast Arcanine because I want to outspeed stuff after Bulldoze like Calyx Shadow Rider. I also really want to outspeed Zacians, for instance. I also felt like it was important to outspeed stuff at neutral anyway, such as Kyogre max speed, which is pretty important, as well as Landispherian, so I could get the Will-O-Wisp off before it gets an attack off. So I went with 228 speed, which gives me that speed stat. 158 allows it to outspeed stuff after Bulldoze, as well as like Landispherian and Timid Kyogre, which is really important. And I decided to go with bulk and HP. I went with 212 HP because that gives me a 192 HP stat, which gives me maximum grassy terrain recovery, an even HP stat for the Citrus Berry proc against like Super Fang or Nature's Madness, so that comes into play. Then the rest, I decided I don't need it all in special attack. I'd rather just have some in defense mainly, because I felt like it was pretty important to take the hits from Zacian. So I ended up investing most into the physical defense, with the remaining into special attack and special defense. And yeah, Arcanine was an interesting Pokemon. It definitely was cool to have a fast Arcanine. The Will-O-Wisp was also really nice to have. I kind of think that Incineroar could also work on this team, because one of the weaknesses of this team, I felt like, was opposing Yveltal, especially Life Orb Yveltal. Life Orb Yveltal is such a big threat to this team. There's not really that many great options, especially if there's a Zacian. So I could see in the future replacing the Arcanine for the Incineroar, because it helps out, because Dynamax Incineroar could actually be pretty useful in that matchup, or at least slowing down, having to fake out as well. But Arcanine did seem pretty cool for that too, so I'm kind of conflicted, but overall Arcanine did perform a pretty good job for when I did use it. Final Pokemon we have is the Life Orb Araquanid with the Water Bubble ability with Liquidation, Soak, Wide Guard, and Protect. Life Orb Araquanid just hits hard, and really hard. I really did like the damage output. I also thought about making it bulky with like leftovers as well because of the Rillaboom grassy terrain, but I felt like the damage from Life Orb just seemed too good to pass up. I also thought about Cobra Berry in case for like Thundurus and Charizard, but overall I was like pretty okay with having Life Orb, because I felt like the damage output that Life Orb Araquanid does, even like through Intimidates, is absolutely insane. Water Bubble, of course, powering up the Liquidation and prevents Araquanid from getting burned, as well as decreasing the attack's power of fire type moves, is really nice. And for the moveset, I felt like I only needed water moves. I was never clicking like Leech Life or like a Lunge or any of those bug type moves. I felt like it wasn't really worth it. I knew I was going to have Wide Guard, so Liquidation and Wide Guard, of course, were pretty much guaranteed. I like having Protect to Preserve the Araquanid. And then last move, I debated about this last move for quite a bit. I feared like Power Split, so I could like maybe take a Zacian's attack stat and then like even it out for Araquanid so it could dish out a huge amount of damage. It was way too niche, and there were many situations where I would probably actually go for it. I'd rather just go for the Liquidation, right? Because I like have a really strong water type move with the Life Orb and Water Bubble, so don't think I really need that. And then I decided on Soak. Now the reason I decided to Soak, because I had Swords Dance on the Rillaboom, so I could Soak something and then maybe Swords Dance up with the Rillaboom and get a Grassy Glide KO, which seems really nice. I also had the Aurorus I could set up with the Meteor Beam, and then Freeze Dry with the Soak would be really cool. And then there's some other stuff, like I could Soak my Yveltal and then I resist the Behemoth Blade, and I'm not taking too much from like Zacians anymore. And there were a lot of defensive plays I thought like could theoretically work with Soak, so I felt like, you know, that seemed like a pretty good option. And then for the Eevee Spread here, I went with pretty simple max HP, 236 attack with Inanimate Nature, or Brave Nature in this case, because it just gives me an extra attack stat. And then I just gave a little bit extra into defense because I didn't feel like I needed the attack or the extra attack Eevees, because I don't think it really makes a difference with the Life Orb calcs. And you know, maybe I'll live like a play rough, for instance, from the Zacian at a certain amount of HP, which could come into play. Araquanid already has crazy Spadef, so I don't really have to invest in that, so just give it to the weaker physical defense. And that was the team. So how to use the team and what are the common leads with the team? Overall, the team can play in a few different ways. It can go for like a bulky Trick Room setup with like Aurorus and Necrozma. You can set up for more like offensive positions with Araquanid and Rillaboom, or you could slow them down using Arcanine and Yveltal. There are many different ways you can utilize this team for victory. Trick Room is usually one thing I would say that's pretty consistent. Setting up Trick Room is really nice for Necrozma. You don't even have to though. What's really nice about this team is it can play multiple different ways, and it's pretty bulky in general, which is nice because you can set up with like Necrozma Dustmane, which is the Pokemon you're probably Dynamaxing the most in most cases, and it's going to be able to get Steel Spike boost as well as Max Quake boost, which is really nice defensive synergy for the entire team in general. There's like ways you could set up with Yveltal, for instance. There's ways you could set it up offensively with the Bulldoze on Arcanine. and set up like incredible positions with Rillaboom, Araquanid, and Aurorus. The common leads with this team, I would say there are quite a few of them, but this team really does have like quite a few different options here, and it really just depends on the situation. You have like leads such as Arcanine and Necrozma, which are really nice. Of course, you could go for the Bolos immediately if you really want to, with the setup with the Dynamax and Weakness Policy setup with Necrozma. Of course, you can lead Yveltal immediately, and Yveltal is really solid with like Arcanine for the Intimidate immediately. I also like leading Yveltal plus Necrozma potentially, because I get to see what I really want to set up for, and I could always switch in Arcanine for an Intimidate, which I always really love. I'd say Araquanid is actually a pretty decent lead, especially with like Necrozma for setting up the Trick Room, and Wide Guard is really nice if I expect a Water Spout or the Astral Barrage immediately. Rillaboom's not a bad lead because I can bluff the Fake Out potentially, and so maybe like a Sword Stance, or like I could switch to bait an attack, which is really good. And yeah, there's just like really a bunch of different leads, and it really just depends on the team you are facing. But yeah, it's really open. I'd say a lot of the common leads usually just set up for one another, either by setting up the Trick Room or setting up like the policy boost on Necrozma, setting up the defense boosts with Yveltal, or maybe setting up for like a Rillaboom Sword Stance, or Aurora setting up and getting attacks off. There's just really multiple different ways you can play with this team, and the leads are very flexible with this team as well. And that is the show. I hope you all enjoyed the thought process of what went behind the makings of the Necrozma and Aurora's team. If you did, please leave a like down below, leave a comment down below. It really does help me out. And of course, if you want to try out this team, there's a rental code on your screen available for 2 weeks, but there is a payment available in the description down below as well. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in. Have a great day, people, and until we bow again, I'll catch y'all later.